2, 1. Hey guys. Hey guys, today we're gonna be starting. Hey guys. Today we're gonna be starting a project to make a full Boba Fett costume. We're starting with the Black Series helmet as like a jumping point, but in the future we'll probably remake the helmet. But for today we're gonna be focusing on the top half, so the vest, top part of the jumpsuit, and the armor panels. We'll make the jetpack in the lower half at some point in the future. We don't have like a set timeline, but if you're also into ASMR, we're making this for an ASMR roleplay if you want to check that out. So to make this costume, we used the 501st Boba Fett Empire Strikes Back CRL as reference. The 501st is a screen accurate cosplay group that does the Empire and Clone Troopers. So we're definitely not going for 501st approval, at least yet, on this, but it provides a fantastic reference with like each aspect of the armor with pictures and details explaining how to make it screen accurate. So that's what we use as a reference. We'll also put a link to that in the description if you guys want to check out the 501st and the reference library that we use for making this costume.
So the first thing we worked on was the vest for Boba Fett, and we used that like polyester kind of shiny gray fabric that we got from Joann's. I think we got 2 yards of it, and that was definitely like enough to do the entire thing. We had like a little bit of leftover. So for the vest, I just used his t-shirt to like get his basic size, you know, because I didn't have like a pattern, and when I usually do sewing, I use like pattern pieces. Except the only thing I excluded was just like the sleeves, and that's because for the vest it's not like a full sleeve, it's like a half sleeve. So I just used just the shirt as a basic pattern piece. Fabric itself was kind of already pretty like mid-weight. It was kind of sturdy, but we wanted it to be like extra sturdy, so we used some interfacing. It looks like this. Then we also just got this from Joann's. The one that we used was midweight to heavyweight fabric, I think. I ironed on the interfacing to the fabric pieces and then sewed it all together. And then I attached the liner, which is made out of the same fabric, to the fabric that has the interfacing. And then I turned it inside out and just ironed it out so it'd be smoother. And on the 501st website, it shows that they're quilted. I didn't really know how to like make it look quilted, so what I did was just sewed lines about 5/8 apart, probably a little bit more, to give it like that quilted look, and it was also like a lot sturdier, which I guess is the point for shoulder pads.
And then the quilted part is also where you attach like the EVA foam, like yellow Boba Fett shoulder pads. Here I am cutting out the EVA foam. You can see I drew on it and then just cut out all the different shapes with an X-Acto knife. I kind of eyeballed it based on the pictures of the 501st website, so it might not be exact, but I think it looks decent enough. So I cut out the chest plates first, and then from like the material that came out of like the scraps, I essentially measured around and then just cut that out, because if you look at sort of Boba Fett's vest and armor, it's not like a seamless armor. There are gaps between all the different pieces. So here's me marking off the foam to cut. I did like a mixture of like 50% measurements to try to make things fairly accurate, and also like just some eyeballing. So there's a little bit of each. The 501st doesn't have exact guidelines on measurements for most things. It does here and there, but if you dig deeper into the forums, you could probably find some. But at least on the template that we used, or the CRL, I think they call it, it's just pretty standard reference images and like the requirements to be approved. So here I am just cutting out with an X-Acto knife. You can also use a box cutter, just whatever sharp knife works for cutting EVA foam. So there it is laid out on the vest. And here is me heating up the EVA foam. One thing that's great about EVA foam is once you heat it up, it's very pliable and easy to shape. I will say that I did this on our rug, and it turns out that that kind of like ruins the rug. So disclaimer: don't use a heat gun on a rug because it'll make the fibers all weird. So don't do that. But a lot of this video will be us messing up and learning from our mistakes. So hopefully, if you guys want to do like cosplay or make your own stuff, that you'll realize our mistakes as beginners and be able to avoid them yourself. Anyways, here I am tracing out the shoulder gauntlets. This is another thing that I use measurements for. And just kind of traced out a hexagon and then cut it out using an X-Acto knife. I also cut notches out of the corners like that, so when you close the gap, it sort of already makes that like pauldron shape. So that worked quite well. And here you can see all of the EVA components cut out and ready to be assembled. Now I turned over to the gauntlet. So this is actually the 5mm foam. I didn't end up using this because I ran out. But here's me heating that up to shape it to my arm. But you'll see in a few minutes it switches to the 10mm foam. I think probably will redo the gauntlets at some point in the future and use thinner foam because I don't think the thicker foam was like quite accurate, but for what we're going for now, it worked reasonably well. So here's again heating up the EVA foam to shape it, this time on the mat, not on the carpet where it gets destroyed. I use rubber bands to also hold it into like a circular shape while I sort of heated up and got it to be like a nice circular shape.
It leaves like impressions though.
Oh yeah, it left impressions, which mostly went away. But anyways, here you can see the two gauntlets, and then there's also two inner pieces kind of near the wrists. Okay, and then here's also another big mistake. This is my first time ever using contact cement, and I had no idea what I was doing, and in typical me fashion, I just went for it and didn't watch any YouTube tutorials, which is of course a mistake. I assumed that you just gob it on and it works. In reality, you're supposed to put a very thin layer, wait for it to dry, and then stick it together. So this is a pretty bad experience. I had to hold it for like 10 minutes to get it to dry. So if you're using contact cement, put a very thin layer on the surface, wait for it to dry fully, and then when you stick it together, it'll instantly weld together. Or not weld together, but it'll instantly cement together. So
how long does it take to dry?
It was like 30 seconds to a minute. Probably a little bit faster if you put like a very thin layer, but definitely with like the very thick layers. And you can see the finish kind of doesn't look great, and it didn't stick all that well because I didn't do it right. So again, another thing that we messed up, or I guess I messed up, that you guys can learn from and do it right the first time. And then here's after I watched a YouTube tutorial about how to contact cement, and you do a very thin layer on the surfaces and wait for it to dry fully. And now here you can see me putting them together, and as opposed to last time when it was all glue being ugly, it just kind of goes together really well. Like as soon as you touch them together, they're pretty much like cemented together. So if you figure out what you're doing before you just go ahead and do it, it'll work much better. So definitely watch some tutorials on contact cementing, and hopefully this helps a little bit too if you want to use EVA foam and contact cement. So there is the gauntlet shape, and we'll quick seal and Dremel out the problem areas once we get to that. But here's me adding more of the details to the gauntlet. So for this, I just squeezed a whole heck of a lot of contact cement over it, and then I believe used another piece of EVA foam as like a scraper to just spread it out. Again, going for like a very nice thin coat covering the whole thing on both like the parent and the part you're applying. So you have, the way it works is like you have it on both sides, and then once they touch, it cements together. So I did this on both the part that I was attaching and the gauntlet. You can see it there, kind of a sloppy job, but I'm still learning. And then once you put them together, it pretty much instantly attaches the two, and it's like a pretty rock solid bond. So it's one nice thing about contact cement, is like once you put it together, it's like definitely like not coming apart. You can see it's all stuck together. Here I am making another part on the right gauntlet, which is like a little tube exit nozzle. Another thing I did was use these smaller EVA foam cylinders. So the gauntlet is like pretty much entirely straight, but obviously and I think most people's arms change shape from like one end to the other, so I made like smaller portions around the wrists so it wasn't like a huge gap and it fit a little bit more snugly so the gauntlets aren't like falling out and like super unconstrained. So here I am again contact cementing them together. Here is the flamethrower gauntlet. I decided to try my hand at making some of the bits and bobs of the flamethrower and the rocket. It didn't come out looking super great, but I think it at least gets the message across of what it's supposed to do. So I used these wooden dowels and EVA foam to just make like a little flamethrower structure type thing and hot glued it all together. I also took the dowel and sanded it at an angle to give it like a point. I think in the future, to remake this stuff, EVA foam worked really well for the shoulder pads and the armor plates, but I think the gauntlets might be better just to 3D print as one structure, just because you can get all the details and greebles and whatnot. But again, you got to start somewhere. So as a first pass, I don't think it turned out too terrible, but I tried. Here I am starting to Dremel. So again, I just don't watch tutorials before I start to do things. I just go ahead and do them myself. So I definitely made quite a few mistakes on the Dremeling. First of all, you should turn it up to the max speed that it goes to get the cleanest edges. Also, you should only Dremel in the direction that the barrel is sanding. I went back and forth. Again, if you only do it in the direction, you get a much smoother finish. So I got the general shape right, but because I used a lower speed and I went, back and forth, the finish is not that great. And then lastly, you also should pass a heat gun over it after you finish Dremeling to heat seal all of the exposed foam underneath, which again just helps the finish. So I had the right Dremeled shape that I was going for, but I didn't get a good finish because of those three reasons. So turn it up to max speed, only move the Dremel in the direction that your barrel is moving, and heat seal it after you're done, and you get a much better Dremel finish. But anyways, I also beveled all the edges of the armor, and after that I used quick seal to seal all the edges around the gauntlet. So this is another skill that I think I didn't have an incorrect technique per se. I think it's just definitely something that requires practice. One thing I've noticed from watching other people make cosplay is that they usually do a couple coats of quick seal, and I just did one, so it might have been better with multiple coats. But it doesn't look too bad in the final product, and you guys will see how it looks soon. Let's see, and then here is the flamethrower gauntlet, all quick sealed, which helps hide blemishes. And then there's the armor plating Dremeled. I also Dremeled kind of bullet holes and scratches, dents in it, to make it look more worn as it is in the reference images. After I finished up all of the EVA foam cutting, Dremeling, and quick sealing, it is time to Plasti dip. So Plasti dip gives a nice robust finish to all of your EVA foam and cosplay, whatever components. A lot of times people just make whatever they're making with any number of materials and then just coat the whole thing in Plasti dip to kind of give it a nice rubbery finish that protects it and makes it a bit sturdier and just gives it ready for priming and painting and whatnot. So here's everything Plasti dipped. I was hoping it would smooth out a lot of the Dremel areas. It didn't too much. It generally keeps the texture of the material, which is good for people that are very skilled and have the correct texture, but I was hoping it would cover up my blemishes, so Another lesson learned there.
So for the jumpsuit, since we're only doing half of it, it's basically just like a long sleeve shirt, and I used one of my shirts actually as a reference for him. It was kind of oversized, so I felt like it was baggy. I think the only tricky thing about the jumpsuit is the fact that there's a short sleeve and a long sleeve like combination. Basically made the long sleeve but cut it in half, so it's like from the elbow down. So I think that's all you needed, that the short sleeve didn't compensate for. And then I sewed that part onto the short sleeve that was already hemmed, so like the second line of thread that you see there is the attachment of the longer sleeve to the short sleeve. The jumpsuit was made out of the like 100% cotton gray fabric that we got from Joann's. One thing that I could probably turn out better is like that long sleeve, short sleeve combination thing, because I feel like I didn't make the short sleeve as prominent.
If you also check out the 501st, it says that the gauntlets are a lighter green than the rest of the armor. I thought I could achieve this by priming them white and leaving the rest of them black, but it really didn't end up mattering too much, and as you can see on the table, we ended up going through like 4 different colors of green to try to get the right one. Luckily, the yellow was right first try. It is gloss finish. We would have gotten more matte if we had it at the store, but the only thing they had is gloss, so I don't think it came out looking too bad, but definitely one big thing which we'll have by the next project is an airbrush, so we can just make and mix our own colors and not have to worry about figuring out a spray paint disaster like we did this time. But here we are after realizing that green sucks, headed to Ace Hardware to get a new green. And for the gauntlets, it came out looking decent. It's definitely way lighter, which is kind of what the 501st website says. We did make a big mistake in not buying new green paint for the armor. We left it this very bright, not so Boba Fett armor green. So that one, we ended up finishing the whole armor and then putting on the costume and realizing that it didn't match the helmet at all and it looked nothing like Boba Fett. So we went out and bought more greens. We'll show painting that at the end. So that's the gauntlet green. And then we ended up buying 2 greens because we couldn't tell which one would work better. We sprayed them both, and this one was just a little too dark, and this one wasn't perfect, but it was good enough that it like looked reasonable. So we went with this one for the armor and that one for the gauntlet. But that was after much trials and tribulations, and we had to end up redoing all of the weathering and whatnot, but we'll get to that in a little bit. You can see on the flamethrower gauntlet, there's little, they're actually square buttons. We just made little circular buttons from like literally dabs of hot glue. And here's me pasting all those on. There are, I think, 5 rows of buttons, which are like 4 deep. So I just go ahead and super glue all those on. So here I am painting everything. So there's silver on the flamethrower, the button pad. There's some blacks on the gauntlet. I just use the masking tape to make it all straight and nice. And then here I am removing the masking tape.
So here's me painting the shoulder pad. I just used reference pictures from the 501st website to try and emulate the bullet holes and like the Mandalorian Mythosaur skull. The symbol on Boba's right chest plate. I just used a stencil from printing it out and eyeballed some of it, and I think it came out pretty good.
Next up, we went ahead and weathered all the panels. For this, we painted on like gray and then used a paper towel to sort of scratch and scrape off the paint to make it look realistic and weathered. And then for Empire Strikes Back, on the left and bottom plates, there is also kind of like a goldy yellow weathering that we added in. Just did the same technique. Paint on the yellow, kind of just like in the whole area, and then just use a paper towel, damp paper towel to scrape off the paint around the corners and give it a nice like chipped appearance, so it looks realistic. And then here I am painting sort of the LED part. Of course, if you actually wanted to be in the 501st, this will have to be like a real LED thing, but for now I just painted it black and then drew on some letters with like red paint and then highlighted with pink paint to make it sort of look like it was glowing. The next step, which actually ended in disaster, was to use a clear coat to like seal all the paint that we added. This ended in disaster. We are pretty sure it's because we used way too much of it, and like sprayed it like in multiple coats very quickly, which causes it to dry weirdly and it causes the paint to peel and crackle. So you can see on the armor plates there, it is kind of peeling and crackly. This is like 98% fixed now, because we just ended up repainting it for other reasons, but for now at least, going on the assumption that we're going to keep this color, which we didn't. We tried to save it in some parts by like pushing back down the paint and it looked okay, and one big spot on the bottom plate we ended up having to cut out all the paint and then like sand it down a little bit and re-spray paint it, and it looked decent enough. It wasn't super duper like noticeable, unless you were like staring at it super up close, so we were okay with it there, but it ended up not mattering because we just repainted the whole thing because we hated the color. But anyways, for the gloves, we didn't sew gloves ourselves. I just bought welding gloves, like very lightweight welding gloves on Amazon, and they came out very white and pure. So I just essentially took water, squirted some black paint into it, mixed it all together so you get sort of dirty paint, and then just like lather dirty paint water all over the gloves to make them look weathered and worn, so they're not just like super pure white gloves.
So that was me sewing up the neck seal. It was like one of the final things that we did. It has, I think the 501st specifies that it has like 5 of those like ribs, quilted ribs on it. I tried just like my best eyeballing, like to see how like tall his neck area is. So I had like a reference of how long it needed to be once like all the fabric was folded up and how much space it needed to cover. And then I just kind of eyeballed it so that all of the ribs would be even and sewed them together. The fabric that I used for the neck seal needed to be the same as the vest. And also I added interfacing so that it could also be sturdy.
So we went ahead and used Velcro to attach all the armor plates to the vest, and right when we attached them, it looked really good, but you can see there when you hold it up next to the helmet. We'll also put a picture on screen that we took right after I put it on, and like it really doesn't match, and I didn't think it looked good, and it kind of looked silly with like such different greens. So we spray painted the centerpiece, sort of one color and the other color. It's still not like neither of them are great matches, but we decided to just do both of them and see which one we liked better. So we did this ultra flat camouflage spray paint first because we thought based on the little thing it would be the closest to the helmet, and it just came out way too dark. So we repainted it with this Krylon matte Spanish moss, and that ended up being what we went with. And then here is the final product. So the gauntlets, chest plates, and helmet all like reasonably match. It's definitely not perfect, but the gauntlets are supposed to be notably lighter than the rest of it. The only thing that's like not super great match is the helmet and the chest plates, but I think it looks better. Before it was quite bad, so I'm much more happy with it, and overall I think the costume came out decent. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it came out great for a first try of ever doing this.
So anyways, closing thoughts. I think that we're definitely a very far cry from screen accurate 501st approvable costumes, but at the same time this is our first time ever doing something like this, and I think it turned out reasonably well, and it doesn't look laughable when you look at it, I don't think, and it's like recognizable as Boba Fett. So I think at least it's a good start. We're on the right track.
Yeah. So I think it came out pretty good.
I'm thankful.
I think it came out great for our first try. Yeah, if you're like too hard on yourself, you might never start. So at least we started and we finished it. That's what I'm proud about. Look forward to us hopefully coming back to this project and improving on it and finishing it, like doing the back armor pieces and the whole bottom half of Boba Fett. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.